How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, I got a juicy video for y'all. And I have often, to nauseam, my royal family, talked about the enemy's woman. And there is a big myth and lie that continue on to this day that Esau's woman played absolutely no part in slavery. And that is not true. There's a book review that I listened to by this sister up here in the Bay Area. She's a professor. And I think it's titled, They Were Her Property. And based on my research, when slavery was going on, 40% of white women owned slaves. That's a big number there. And, you know, the one thing that bites Esau in the ass, they love to keep records of their accomplishments. It don't matter if it's good or bad. So she was able to go into the archives down south. So what I'm getting ready to do, my royal family, is do an exposed video. Some may know and some may not. And these were some things that I didn't know. I have a few videos that show the royal family, and also have two, because these articles are extremely long, so I often say I'm going to read the juicy parts out of two articles. So what I'm going to do first is read this first article. And it says here, 7 things the United Daughters of the Confederacy might not want you to know about them. Now, I'm not going to get in all of that. Like I said, I'm going to read a portion of this article and you will fully understand. It's helpful in the midst of any what? Okay, where am I? Slow down. Okay. It's helpful in the midst of any conversation about the country's Confederate monuments to understand who put these things up, or unquote statues. Monuments, that's the word I'm saying. That's what they are, but I'm throw the statue in there, which also offers a clue as to why. In large part, the answer is the first question is the United Daughters of the Confederacy, a white Southern women's heritage group founded in 1894. And here's their flag. Okay, where am I? 1894. Starting 30 years after the Civil War. And as historian Karen Cox noted in her 2003 book, Dixie Daughters, or they'll say UDC members, inspired to transform military defeats into a political and cultural victory where states' rights and white supremacy remain intact. In other words, when the Civil War gave them lemons, the UDC made lemonade. Horribly bitter, super racist lemonade. All right, my royal family. Let's get into this first video.
The day after Richmond fell, Abraham Lincoln came to Richmond. He came to this house. General Weitzel says, Mr. President, how should we treat these people? And Lincoln says, let them up easy.
Richmond, Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy, and that's kind of hard to miss considering all of the monuments to Confederate war heroes throughout the city. It is very rare for the losing side of a war to have monuments.
Guess what else is real rare in world history? The whole way we ended the Civil War.
But those statues take on a really charged feeling for people.
We have a clash around memory and heritage and what it means with regard to the American Civil War.
Civil wars usually end with the losers going to the hangman's noose, the guillotine, to prison, to exile, or something. And in this case, they just went home.
In America today, almost half the country believes that the Civil War was about states' rights. But the historical record shows that the Civil War was about slavery. I talked to Waite Rawls, the former president of the Museum of the Confederacy, to get some answers.
Was slavery the principal cause of that political dispute? Yeah. There's no way to deny that. But to say Confederacy is synonymous with racist is to connote, and nobody else was, and they were all by themselves in that. 99% of the white people living in the United States in 1860 were racist, including Abraham Lincoln.
Initially, Lincoln was not in favor of giving blacks voting rights, or allowing them to hold office, or even intermarry with whites. Eventually, he did make incredible steps forward in terms of equal rights, like the 13th Amendment and the Freedmen's Bureau Bill. But his main priority at the time was keeping the Union together. So he also pardoned all the Confederates and vetoed legislation banning slavery altogether. Back then, white supremacy was the nation's prevailing social order throughout all of the Union.
Another side of reconciling is we got to push those African Americans out of the way. They're in the way to the national reconciliation of the white North and the white South. That gives ground for a lost cause politically, which was we couldn't have been wrong, we simply must have been outnumbered.
The Lost Cause was a national propaganda campaign to misrepresent what the Civil War was actually about. The main tenets of the Lost Cause are that the Confederacy was fighting for states' rights, not slavery, that slaves had great working conditions, were loyal to their masters, and often fought for the Confederacy, portraying slave owners as kind and Southerners in general as more steeped in Christian values, in order to make the case that they were fighting for a just cause and only lost because they were outnumbered.
It is a reflection of a need for Southerners to reconcile their grief over significant losses, the total disruption initially of their social order of white supremacy, whether you were slaveholding or not.
But how did we get to a point where a propaganda campaign became American history?
General Moore, at 99, follows the heroic dead of the South to a soldier's grave in Selma, Alabama, as the last tiny handful of the boys in gray prepares for the final Confederate reunion in Norfolk, Virginia.
The women who are most responsible for this did an extraordinary job.
A lot of the Lost Cause narratives can be traced back to funerals for Confederate soldiers and the women they left behind after the war. Women all over the South started creating memorial associations to collect the bodies of Confederate soldiers, properly bury them, and create monuments to their fallen heroes. One of the most prominent groups was the Confederate Memorial Literary Society.
They send out a call to prominent white women throughout the South and say, we have to preserve the legacy of our loved ones. And they open up what they call the Confederate Museum, and it is a hit.
It was a shrine. It was a shrine to the Confederacy.
Each room of the house was set up with these artifacts from each of the Confederate states. But it's only their story. If black folk are represented, it's because they are the loyal, loving slaves, supposedly.
One of the underrepresented stories of the American Civil War is the U.S. colored troops. At the end of the war, there were more black men in blue uniforms than white men in gray uniform. People need to know that.
We have completely removed black people from the narrative when they were central to it.
The Lost Cause made its way into popular culture through films like Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind.
The Confederates need it, so we's gonna dig for the South. Don't worry, we'll stop them Yankees.
Goodbye, Big Sam. Goodbye, boys. Stay out of here.
And eventually found its way into school textbooks and even legislation.
This group has nothing to do with discrimination that Congress prohibits, nor do they advocate radical...
1910, they make the decision that, hey, no more textbooks that speak ill of the Confederacy. And that persists until today in some places.
In 2018, Christie and Waite decided to merge their museums to provide a more accurate picture of the Civil War from multiple perspectives.
What you want is for people to form their own perspective fully informed.
What's the harm in people not knowing the lost cause?
The harm comes when there is a disrespect for dignity of life that becomes sort of generational because it's grounded in a series of lies. The history has never been about the dead people, really. It's always about us and the moment that we're in and the issues we're trying to contemplate and wanting to understand sort of this connective tissue. It's always been that.
Do you feel like Richmond is going through its own sort of truth and reconciliation process through these challenging discourses, disagreements, and representations of the city?
I think Richmond is going through a period of awakening. The only way that you really can come to some form of conciliatory behavior is when everybody finally understands it and has a desire to move forward in a more equitable way. This is what we do in museums. The challenge is helping people build new memories so they can create a more accurate heritage.
The American experiment was a huge advance into something very, very new. And they called it an experiment all the time. We need to continue calling it an experiment, which means that it can get better if we keep working at it.
All right, my royal family. So none of this is surprising to me at all. How these evil ass women played a big hand in getting those statues erected. And when I was doing my research yesterday, they said over 700 of them were put up, and we know why. Now, first, they claim that they were put up in memory of their loved ones that had died on the battlefield. But and then they claim, but over time they started putting even more up, and they lost. It was to keep us in a state of fear. And lately, a lot of these statues have been, they're coming down because we're sick and tired of it. But that's not enough for the royal family. Taking down statues do not change our immediate situation. They act like they did something real big, and then they'll say, well, we'll erect something up in honor of. Remember when I was talking about the other day, they're all they want to promote to us is symbolisms and all this stuff. And then y'all want to study to nauseam about how we're going to receive what is due to us, ADOS. All this, it's just always games and charade. But we're only going to focus. That's their flag. On Esau's woman, how she is fully invested in keeping white supremacy alive, because it's pretty much dying off. So they're going to be working harder. And we've been watching these videos, these Karen videos, and they're having their moments and, just drama queens in the streets of America. So let's get into this next video.
Listen to how this textbook describes slavery. The master often had a barbecue or a picnic for his slaves. Then they had a great frolic. Even while working in the cotton fields, they sang songs. The beat of the music and the richness of their voices made work seem light.
Yikes, that's from History of Georgia, a textbook published in 1954 that was taught across junior high schools in Georgia for decades. That sort of language is part of an intellectual movement called the Lost Cause, a distorted version of American Civil War history that's been prevalent in the South for a long time. It took shape soon after the defeat of the Confederate States in the war, when Southern historians like Edward Pollard and former Confederate General Jubal Early started preserving the South's perspective through their writings. They framed the Confederate cause as a heroic defense of the Southern way of life against the overwhelming forces in the North. That narrative has a few basic tenets: the glorification of Confederate soldiers who died for a cause they believed in, the belief that slavery was a benevolent institution, and maybe most importantly, that slavery was not the root cause of the war. The Lost Cause is one of the most notoriously effective efforts to rewrite history, and it was done by the losing side. So how did it become so deeply rooted in Southern memory? Blame the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The UDC was founded in Nashville in 1894 to preserve Confederate culture for generations to come. The women who made up the group descended from elite antebellum families, and they used their social and political clout to spread the pro-Southern version of the war as real history. You've probably seen their efforts to honor the Confederacy, but maybe you didn't know it was the UDC. They're the ones who covered the Southern landscape with memorials for Confederate leaders and soldiers. They used their fundraising and lobbying skills to pressure local governments into erecting monuments in prominent public spaces like courthouses and state capitals.
Installed here next to the state capitol by the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy donated this memorial to the city back in the 30s.
They put them along roadsides and in parks. Any place that was remotely relevant to the Confederacy was memorialized. By the early 20th century, the UDC had 100,000 members in chapters spread all over the country, but mostly in former Confederate states. And there's a reason they grew so quickly during that time.
So we're talking about roughly 3 decades after the end of the war, and the Confederate veterans themselves are beginning to die off. So there is this push to find ways to commemorate it, because the big challenge by 1900 was there's a new generation of white Southerners being born, and they never experienced the war years.
That push is visible. Most of the Confederate monuments were erected during the UDC's height of influence.
There's a rhetoric around monuments that we want to get this thing built before all of that generation has died off. And the reason we want it is to teach future generations about those men.
Dr. Karen Cox wrote the book on the UDC, and I asked her if it was fair to say the group established the Lost Cause as historical fact in the South.
Oh my God, yeah. They were the leaders of the Lost Cause into the 20th century, and they made it a movement about vindication.
Just to give you an idea of how effective they were, they successfully lobbied for a Confederate memorial in Arlington National Cemetery, which U.S. President Woodrow Wilson proudly unveiled to a cheering crowd. Now that's influence, right?
Monuments are the least of what they did.
What?
I mean, they are the most visible and tangible, but the work with children was far more influential.
It turns out a central UDC objective is shaping how children think about the war and their Southern heritage. One of their most powerful tools? Textbooks. Take a look at this pamphlet called A Measuring Rod for Textbooks. It was written by the illustrious Southern historian Miss Mildred Rutherford, an educator, orator, and author of Southern history textbooks. She's also very pro-slavery. The pamphlet announced the formation of a textbook review committee featuring prominent Southerners like 5 former Confederate generals. This group was committed to spreading the truths of Confederate history, so they instructed school boards to reject any textbooks that did not accord full justice to the South. And they urged libraries to deface every book in their collection that didn't measure up by writing the words "unjust to the South" clearly on its cover. This pamphlet was shared widely with school boards throughout the South, and UDC-backed committees closely monitored history books to make sure Northern influence never reached classrooms. So the core language of an approved textbook aligned precisely with that of the Lost Cause. You know, stuff like,
the Confederacy lost in the war between the states, but Georgia never forgot to honor her Confederate soldiers.
History of Georgia was on the UDC's approved list. It was also written by E. Merton Coulter, a self-described Southern historian and historian-described white supremacist.
They understand that how you educate, who wins the writing game, who wins the battle over history, ultimately wins the war. That's the big fight for the UDC.
But their work with children went further than the classrooms. The UDC formed an auxiliary group called the Children of the Confederacy, which was designed to get kids born in former Confederate states to actively participate in their version of history. Group leaders had kids recite call and response truths from something called the Confederate Catechism. Children up to the age of 18 would compete and be rewarded for memorizing long passages of lost cause rhetoric.
So it would be like an after-school thing, like that was your club. You would go after school to the meeting of the Children of the Confederacy, and your leader might teach you songs of the South, like Dixie or other songs that were considered Southern patriotic songs. They would have them write essays, go visit the veterans, and learn this catechism.
Children were also the centerpiece of their community's monument unveilings, like this living flag at the dedication of the Stonewall Jackson Monument in Richmond. Yes, those are school children. The UDC's efforts shaped the identities of children who grew up with the lost cause. They made history personal, and that made their story last longer.
Generations of children learning that narrative in a variety of ways grow up to be, segregationists in the 50s and 60s, because that's been drilled into them since they were children.
After World War I, the UDC started losing steam, but the damage was done. The monuments were in place, and the textbooks they wrote remained in Southern classrooms until the late 70s. And the women's group did it all without the right to vote or participate in politics.
You can still get glimmers of this lost cause memory of the war from people who will always choose to see it through the personal. And I think the UDC, to a great extent, was their goal.
So the next time someone says the Confederate monuments are about remembering our history, just know that that's exactly what the United Daughters of the Confederacy wants you to think.
That was spot on, my royal family. That was straight spot on. Now, what I was thinking, my royal family, was that I was thinking about the school system. We often talk about the first teacher of the child, and we see with the enemy's woman, she was very dedicated, very committed. Fundraisers, they did everything they had to do to preserve white supremacy. And then all they did was tweak it as time went on, because then integration eventually came, and they said, oh, this is a good opportunity. Now I got to deal with these black children. We'll just brainwash the hell out of them and everything. So that was what was on my mind. Now, before we get in to the next video, I'm going to read a part of this other article. Since the UDC founding, in 1894, the elite white Southern ladies group has dedicated itself to erecting Confederate monuments around the country. In more recent years, quietly ensuring these markers remain standing. They have been the single most effective propagandists for the lost cause myth and an alternative fact-written vision of the history that denies slavery as the central cause of Civil War, while also insisting that slavery was a beneficial institution. A win-win for both enslavers and the enslaved. UDC textbooks have taught generations of Southern children that the Confederacy, a nation being white superiority and black enslavement. That speaks volumes how dedicated these folks were to upholding white supremacy. So we need to get in the present. Just a snippet, my royal family. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see here what is going on. Oh, I'll get back to that in just a bit. All right.
Which chapter? We are Turner Ashby 184, United Daughters of the Confederacy. I'm Kimberly Hawk. I'm the president of the chapter. The last 2 weekends, I missed memorial services relatively closer to me than this one, Front Royal, and the one in Newmarket prior to that, and because of my kids' soccer. So I thought, I want to see somebody else's before our 6th of June. So I thought I'd come down here, and it's a beautiful campus.
As a Yankee,
we generally associate the Confederacy with slavery.
Right, and I understand that, but you know, yes, slavery was a very hot topic back then. I guess you could say, even 20 years prior to that, even, especially in the Kansas-Missouri border states, the abolitionists and all that went on out there. The war was fought more. States' rights started everything, as I feel. The South wanted to do things their way, and the North wanted to control that. And that's basically what fueled the fire for South Carolina to succeed from the Union to begin with.
Company A, 5th South Carolina Infantry. James H. Ingalls, Company F, 22nd Virginia Infantry. John J. Meade, Company D, 24th Virginia Infantry.
Sergeant Randolph was given the same honors that at her funeral that had been bestowed upon Mrs. Jefferson Davis. Pretty impressive. She was a woman who was revered. However, in my mind and in my heart, she is simply the woman who broke Ben Palmer's heart.
How do you feel about being in the Union today?
Love it. I love
Things
it.
worked out for the best.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, who knows what it would be like. You know, nobody can say it would be better or worse. You know, but it's still a great country.
All right. Take that down, my royal family. So, we see that they continue to exist. Here's their website, United Daughters of the Confederacy. And look here. They even have something here for their children. They have not stopped doing anything. You know, ain't a damn thing changed, my royal family. They giving out scholarships. I know they're having they got a number of scholarships they give out and stuff. And, you know, these people, you have to watch them. They'll even give us our royals a scholarship, you know, to make it look like they ain't what they about. But they were very clear in their intentions. So when we see these mere gestures of this shit coming down, how is that affecting our lives? You know, oh yeah, we'll take it down, but they still doing what they doing. And some of our folks are so damaged by this system that taking a knee, apologizing, tearing down a statue, putting up an ugly ass museum, just some of us do get caught up in symbolism. We the only ones that haven't received our reparations. Now y'all fully understand when the Creator gave me that message, because people are new, my royal family. Some people are new on the True Royal Family and True Royal. I repeat myself a lot. I get visions, and it's been 4 years now, and the Creator said this: the white woman will be the first to get my wrath, but that does not exclude the white man because he upheld her shit. I mean, they're exposed to the fullest. In fact, I meant to say, the article that I read, that little piece of it, time to expose the women still celebrating the Confederacy. They are dedicated. And I would imagine, because they seeing what's going down in America, they're digging their heels in more so than ever. You see why we are being separated? Because these folks is dangerous. Their kingdom is falling before their eyes, and they don't know how to reinvent their selves. They always have a crutch. Now they being exposed on the world stage. What you gonna do now? Really? I'm asking the enemy and the enemy supporters. What y'all gonna do now? Really? Can you come up with something? So it's all about exposure, my royal family, and also about showing that ain't a damn thing changed. They still doing what they doing right here, you know. They got chapters everywhere. So I just wanted to expose this, and get a little bit deeper into it. There was some things that I left out. Like I said, you have to pick and choose your battles at the end of the day. So anyway, my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And it's always my royal family. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.